Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Max Hollein. I'm the director and CEO of the Metropolitan Museum, and it's fantastic to see you here at this evening's program that we call A Conversation on Philip Guston. So as many of you know, or some of you know, in 2022, it was announced that the Met would become the really largest and main repository of the works of Philip Guston. And that is thanks to the extraordinary generosity and the vision of his daughter, Musa Guston Mayer, who made really the unprecedented promised gift of 220 works by one of the 20th century's most important artists to this museum. And in addition to this tremendous commitment of works of art and trust also in this institution, she and her husband, Tom Mayer, have also established the Philip Guston Endowment Fund, which supports the care, the research, the programming, the scholarship of this collection. And it makes us really such an active and powerful advocate, and I would say also transmitter of the important work of Philip Guston. And I want to thank Musa and Tom, who are both here today, so much for their enormously generous gift. Since then, we have focused, of course, even more so than before, on the work of Philip Guston, that we've collected, of course, already in previous times. But now, having become this main, really also research facility on Guston, we've done different collection presentations. We're working on Philip Guston in various ways. We're presenting right now the panel paintings in our galleries in the modern and contemporary wing. We've hosted all sorts of different talks. We are also looking ahead, of course, to the building and rebuilding of our modern and contemporary wing, where, yes, we will have much more and ample opportunities to really also put the work of Philip Guston in context with many other artists, in context with art history, and in context of what Philip Guston's work meant for so many other artists. So under the leadership of David Breslin, our chairman, our head of modern contemporary art, this work continues and is going forward fruitfully. In making her remarkable gift, Musa Mayer also was inspired for sure also by the recognition of the importance of Guston's legacy by younger artists. And I think that's really what's so remarkable also of Guston's work, is that, of course, he's been a trailblazing artist ever since the 1950s, but his work feels so current, so contemporary, so almost like really inspirational for artists of already now 2, maybe even 3 generations. And in that context, I think you want to see Philip Guston's work also in a much broader light. And so Musa wrote about when she gave the gift, about this, especially this context, I'm not quoting her. My father's insistence in following his own path, regardless of the consequences to his career or reputation within the art world, is seen by many artists as courageous, even empowering. He was always questioning his work, challenging the enterprise of painting, opening himself to the pain and ugliness of the world, allowing the transformations he considered essential. His value as an influence on younger painters derives from this inner challenge, which he shared so openly with others. And so in this context, this evening's program has been conceived as really the start of an ongoing series where we would like to have current painters, current artists speak about Guston's work and what it means for them and how they kind of respond to it in many different ways. And I want to thank, of course, especially 2 outstanding artists who are here tonight, Schutz and Salman Toor, who will be in conversation on Philip Guston with Met Curator Brinda Kumar. And Brinda will, of course, already will then introduce them properly. But I just want to thank really Dana and Salman. I think for artists, it's already almost like, I don't know, it's tough to ask them to talk about their own work. But it's even tougher to ask them to talk about another artist's work. and especially if it's such a towering figure like Philip Guston. So I want to thank them for taking on this challenge and for being here with us tonight. And I want to turn it over to Brinda and to Dana and Salman. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Max, and good evening, everybody. I'm Brinda Kumar, Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art here at the Met, and I'm honored to be in conversation this evening with two eminent artists, Dana Schutz and Salman Toor. But it's Philip Guston who brings us together this evening. There are many Gustons to consider. As those of you who are familiar with the range of his practice will no doubt know, there is the early Guston, who with youthful passion and a clear sense of purpose responded to the social and political injustices in works such as the recently restored mural in Morelia in Mexico, but also with sympathy and poignancy to the vulnerabilities of those around him during the Great Depression in his work as a WPA artist. There is Guston the easel painter, who achieved critical acclaim in symbolically rich compositions in which the inner and outer worlds of the figures that populate his paintings merge in ways that reflect the social malaise brought about by civic and cultural transitions and are irrevocably changed by the end of the Second World War and the horrors that it wrought. There is the Guston who turned to abstraction as a new means of making sense of the world in paint, and the Guston for whom that would become darker and more tormented in time, more racked with self-doubt. There is the Guston who distilled it all down to a line, a black line, and found a new way forward in the everyday stuff of the studio. What kind of a man am I, he felt impelled to ask himself, searching for a way to respond to a world around him that was seeming to spin out of control. In finding what kind of a man, what kind of an artist he was, he exhorted himself to evolve yet new means of expression, unflinching, humorous, horrific, vulnerable, political, and personal. And he did, in what proved to be the last and most prolific decade of his life. There is Guston, whose pantheon were Piero della Francesca, Masaccio, Giotto, De Chirico, but also the boyhood cartoons of George Herriman and Bud Fisher. In the words of a recent major retrospective, there was Philip Guston then and Philip Guston now, and we remain in the now. And in part because his career spanned much of the 20th century, a century of enormous change and transformation, but also because Guston himself was temperamentally restless and searching. He took his responsibilities as an artist to meet the moment tremendously seriously. Throughout his career, he remained committed to the belief that art, and for him painting, held the potential to respond trenchantly to the tumult of the world around, in a manner that expands our understanding, sharpens our critical insights, and extends our empathy, and thus holds the potential to be deeply consequential, even transformative. And his art invites us to think with him, through his paintings, finding at times points of connection, at others points of departure, from our own explorations as we confront the times in which we live. Artists have long recognized this potential in Guston's work and as a springboard along their own journeys. And tonight I'm delighted that Dana and Salman are here with us to consider what Guston has meant to them. I'll invite them now to say a few words. Salman, over to you first.
Thank you so much for having me here, first of all. Honored. So I was born in Pakistan, and I moved to the States, I want to say about a good 20 years ago, and I arrived at the kind of painting that I do now after years of sort of academic art historical work, looking at 18th and 17th century painting. And Guston was kind of like was a modern painter who ushered me into doing this kind of contemporary work. And So I work from imagination, often thinking about friends and family and their faces. It's very important to me that there's a sense of humor in my work. There are a few recurring themes, like a lot of the times like hot construction guys, creating structures in which a lot of these stories occur. I would say another theme is immigrants finding safe spaces in places like New York, but particularly, and also I would say like the story of the Sissy, an urban queer person, as a performance. But the thing that particularly brings me to Guston is a series of drawings that I call fag puddles. And these are sort of collections of objects and body parts that I like to work with. And they're simply like objects that I like to think about and I enjoy painting. I think of them as sort of heaps of sort of overconsumption, fabulous, sort of depression. There's a sense of prayer about them. There's a particular concentration on costume, which I also find is present in Guston, late Guston, and a sense of abandonment. There are particular things that recur in these a lot, like crowns or vitrines. Often the body types in these fag puddles are very thin and hairy, playing with tropes about Middle Eastern bodies, or, racist anxieties about hygiene and foreign bodies, immigrants, but also fashion and frivolity. And yeah, I think that's it for me. Yeah.
You can certainly
Yeah.
see some of those connections to Guston already coming out, and looking forward to digging into those, feeling those back perhaps. Dana, over to you.
Thank you. It's a very big honor, and thank you. It's great to be in conversation with Salman and Brinda. Okay, so I've been influenced by Guston for a lot, for different reasons at different point in my life. And when I was younger and deciding to make subjective paintings, I thought it was very inspiring how Guston started his paintings with a question, specifically the Klansman, starting with the question of what if I was the villain, and then what would I do? I would plot and plan, but then I'd have sandwiches and probably make paintings. And so I thought that was like it was interesting to start a painting with a problem, and how that could begin to be a generative problem and make the potential for paintings, other paintings. So this was an earlier group of paintings that I made of what if you could eat yourself? Like, how would that look? How would that work? And then what would happen? You would digest yourself, and then you could make yourself to be whatever form you wanted to be. And so also the way that Guston's paintings kind of have a sense of physics was really interesting to me, that all of his subjects feel like they're affected by forces in the world, but then within a painting you can kind of control those forces, like gravity or the specific weight of objects. This is a painting of people painting a hill while they're on the hill, but their depictions are fragmenting the hill that they're on. And also the way that his paintings are always kind of metaphorical or kind of modern allegory. and that a subject is not always just what it is. So like a bowl of cherries is like a plate of bombs, or, plate of fries is like a fallen Colosseum. This is a group that are huddled on top of a pile of jawbones, and but the jawbones could feel like the mechanics of language or a broken alphabet or a previous civilization. And this is just a terrible group of people, like headed in one direction. But there's all these figures of speech in the painting, like there's like a beating a dead horse, or choking a chicken, or chicken with its head cut off. But it also feels like they're trying to lug all these things, like, cruelty, or also just stuff, like up this hill as they try to ascend. And I also like how Guston's paintings have this sense of painting what it feels like what it feels like to be a person in the world. And I feel like a painting is really good at that, like trying to depict what something feels like rather than what something looks like. So what it feels like on a walk to the studio, or to be in a body, or what it is to have an inside and an outside, or the feeling of awkwardness, or the sun. This is a sort of repair and damage in one painting. And also like ambiguity, like there, that is like produces meaning. So this is like it's either a public coronation or humiliation. And then this is just a monster in the studio. I don't know. But I thought this was a subject that could be many things happening at once in a painting. Like there's an ambiguity of action and implement and time, and also who has more agency, the painting or the subject. But thank you.
Oops, thank you. I wanted to go back into your own paintings a little bit more and can spend some more time on them, but maybe we can go back and forth on those. It was great to kind of see some of those connections come forth. And I know that you were both in our discussions leading up to this conversation tonight, you gravitated towards late Guston a lot in some of your work. So maybe let's start with a great late painting of his, and I know one that is a favorite of both of you when we were talking about it. Back View came up as something that you were immediately drawn to. This is actually Back View 2 from 1978, and interestingly, the same title appears on a number of works of Guston's from at least a decade earlier, and arguably the kind of posture of the figure who's turning his back on us, the viewer, but also potentially on other things, is the central figure, something that you'll remember from martial memory, which we'll come back to later. So that's going way, way back. And but I'm kind of curious about, how you position your figures. And Salman, you do this as well, the kind of, how do we encounter the body? From what angle do we arrive at it? Which vantage are we seeing the body from, that both occludes and reveals at the same time? And you both commented on the kind of weightiness of this painting, and I was wondering if you could each take a turn at talking a little bit about what drew you to this particular work, and why you kind of found that compelling.
All right, well, at first I didn't even know that this was a back view of anything, but so I appreciated that there was a title. And what I love about this painting is that it has all the essential ingredients of what drew my attention to late Guston, which is the tubular forms, the nails, that kind of horseshoe thing that occurs a lot, or like the almost screws that go into gobbling together something that looks armored, like it's like a tank, and it's almost dangerous looking. And I think we talked about it when we were Zooming, but like, I think we both sort of thought what it might look like for this thing to fall down a hill. And like, so would it kind of break apart at the foot of the hill? And, but I mean, on another note, just to finish off, it's I kind of, in Guston's imagination, this may have been, it looks like an inscrutable artist, like an unknowable person looking away, and or even like an idea of like some kind of potentate, you know, an armored transformer made of junk. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that you saw it going forward, because it's such a change in how you see it, but it's such a strange situation with the painting where the ground that the figure is standing on is sort of undetermined, and then maybe the future or where it's going is sort of obliterated or not visible either. So there's a real precarity in the form. Like you feel like it could keel over maybe, but but it definitely does feel like the way the head is, and to me, like, and everything on the shoulders, it feels like it's lugging just all this like carnage or like past baggage with it, like whether it's personal or historic, but it has such a intense emotional tone, and also strange like heaviness and lightness. I loved how you in the Zoom said it felt like this war machine or something, or that the legs felt like pistons. Or
yeah, I would not want to be in its way. Like,
right.
you know, yeah. And yeah, it's I think there is like it is a repeated theme in Guston to me, which I see is very masculine to me, and yeah, very heavy.
Yeah.
But it also kind of reminded me, Dana, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how this kind of agglomeration, like the teetering quality that you were recognizing about it in your own work, in your own pile-ups of those figures that you feel like they're off balance, and that kind of sense of you're walking on unstable ground, and this is a kind of a shifting landscape, and this figure is plodding along in it, and your groups and compositions have that energy as well, where you have these pile-ups. Do you recognize that? Is that something that?
I think it's always so unexpected, like when it happens in a painting, and then how it is, what kind of content it would carry with it. But yeah, sometimes something can feel off, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, you know. But you don't know it until you see it. You're like, oh, that's how that is.
And one of the things with this painting that, you know, that there's carrying everything, like it's almost like all the belongings. It made me think about, I know it's been interpreted in some ways of thinking about migration as well. And I know you mentioned that to Salman. I was wondering if that was something that, you know, where you're carrying your whole self as you go along in the solitary.
Or in this case, like a severed self.
Severed self,
severed self
partial.
with many limbs and you know, belongings. It's a kind of like a transformer hobo. That's maybe it has wheels. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. I feel like it can't really walk. But yeah, there is this idea of tangles of things that are tangles of wires and limbs and that sort of like kind of sit around like a blob or like move in their own unique way. And I tend to think of, I mean, I like to think of those in my own work as like a kind of immigration comedy or tragedy of some sort, like an immigrant creature.
So if you can't laugh, you've got to laugh, otherwise you'd cry kind of situation.
Yeah, some sort of like adaptable caterpillar creature.
Chameleon-like, yeah.
That is has many different, can reassemble itself in many different ways and code switch. And
You're convincing us that this is really a transformer now.
yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, well, moving on to a different figure, perhaps more recognizable. I know that Guston often interrogated the purpose of art and by extension the role of the artist in his work, but he also often lays bare in his painting a kind of really brutally honest window into the angst-riven, insomniac, indulgent, self-scrutinizing, self-doubting of the artist in the privacy of a studio. And I know in your own work this kind of comes up, and I know we were also just chatting about this, the struggles of the studio and how that manifests onto paint, even in advance of this conversation as we were gearing up towards it. And over here, of course, it's the painter himself, wide-eyed and awake in the middle of the night and watching the hours tick by and smoking, and always smoking. But I was, and then of course we have this great, the studio is another work where he's interrogating the artist and himself. But I was wondering what for you in Guston or in your own work does turning the lens on the artist's self make possible?
Well, the artist's self-portraits, I think, first of all, this is just such an iconic image because as far as I remember, after graduating from Pratt in 2009 and getting a studio in Bushwick, this is what everyone thought that they were on the inside, all the painters in Bushwick. So with a cigarette in their mouth, with huge kind of Doc Martens kind of sticking out at the end of the bed. The artist as this kind of militant artist, and it's not just, I guess, an image of a self-portrait, but also it's kind of a scary image of insomnia to me, at least. But it's also, it's a joke. These are jokes about himself. I'm sure he didn't take himself this seriously. They're just, when I look at this, I think, oh, he can't sleep, or he's just, he's waiting for when he can get up and paint again. And this, I guess the brutality and the self-honesty maybe is in the, I don't know why he chose exactly the flesh-colored tones, but the way that he works with cadmium red on this raw meat color that he uses, they're gashes. And they kind of always have reminded me of a little bit of pain, well, quite a lot of pain. Yeah, could we possibly go to the other one? But the artist is also, as a person who is essentially unknowable even to themselves. They're veiled. I think the kind of funniness in this image to me is that it's the grand kind of curtain in that one. It looks like it moves from a abstract expressionist studio to something out of Vermeer or Rubens, and but I think he's kind of making a joke about his own complicity and complacency and the things that the political kind of stuff that I guess that he's addressing in his work. Yeah.
It's interesting with the bed painting. I was having a disagreement with a friend about what this painting felt like, because I actually felt it felt kind of happy. But there's been other bed paintings of his where they feel really, it's like a head, and the body is straight-jacketed by the, blankets, and they feel desperate in the night, or your head is going, but your body can't move.
Right.
And things are pressing on you. but I was like, oh, this kind of looks nice. Like maybe the sun is rising, the paints are all laid out, it's ready. But it's interesting, like painting painters, and also how Guston, the space of Guston's paintings, which is kind of like this fictional space, but parallels the world, and how like they kind of are always so much about him, I assume, like how he felt, or like what the feeling of something was, or like kind of what a situation would be like. And then like, can you go to the next image, and just how that it can work out differently in different paintings. Like there's the kind of red hand, like kind of caught you red-handed feeling in the painting in the studio. And this one is so interesting because it feels like, okay, well, there's more of them. Like there's just, behind all of those windows, there's another group of Klansmen talking. Like there's just all over the city. But it's interesting how I don't know, go on.
No. I like the getting caught red-handed painting as was.
That's very cool. I'm very good to know. Like I hadn't kind of. I'm sure he meant that. Like.
Yeah.
But you don't know if it's actual blood or paint,
Right.
or
Exactly.
It could be either.
Right. Yeah. But there's a knowingness in these compositions, right, and a self-knowingness, I think, but also of the complicity that you were talking about, but also that lineage. I think it's kind of telling, and I know this was something that struck you too, Salman, and you think about this deeply as well, is that connection to deep history. I mean, he titles it on the canvas Pittore, like, so,
Right.
You're kind of thinking of yourself within a lineage, and you're literally putting your tools of the trade right by you, optimistically, potentially, as Dana reads it, but very knowingly nonetheless.
Yeah, and that also it's a funny, it has a humorous edge, that thought. It's like, the weight of history on the artist. And, I think that it's very cool to, I guess, feel it, but also then I think in these paintings especially, it's not, what I love about them is that they have brevity, it's not serious. Because that kind of, I think it can become too melodramatic. It can make it sink, that urge.
Yeah, I think there's the kind of balancing act between the heaviness and humor, I think, which Guston kind of gets at, and I think, Dana, you've reflected on that too in some of these works in terms of talking about costuming as well. Your figures too, they're doing horrible, horrific things, and yet there's something funny about it at the same time. And how does that how do you think about that when you look at these Klansmen? Like you said, there could be Klansmen behind every one of those windows, right? Painting behind one of those windows or chatting.
Yeah, but I think it's. I mean, I think it's always kind of with humor. It's sort of an unexpected thing you don't know, and there's sometimes the intention is not to intentionally make something funny, or but when you're painting, life has a lot of different. You can have different feelings towards many different things, and when you're painting, you're always not so in control of that, like when you're painting. But I think with Guston, it was always felt like this, the hooded figure felt like this kind of evil, or that could be with everybody, or human cruelty that is there, that anybody, could, it exists for humans, or for people. So
maybe let's thinking about that, if this was the turning inward, looking at the artist themselves and that self-interrogation, I think Guston, one of the other things that he does in this moment, but not only in this later moment, but at different points in his career, he trained his eye on the outside world as well, and the painterly analysis is evident in these canvases. We recognize in work such as this and related paintings like The Street, the lessons that he's learned from Ocello and the Battle of San Romano, that great scene that we have now translated onto the American street, and we know this was in response to a period of civic upheaval that he reached not only for Ocello, as we see over here, but also his own earlier work, Martial Memory, in the time in which we find ourselves, in the times in which we work, in which you spend time in your studio. What in Guston do you find yourself reaching for or finding helpful in you're navigating your own thoughts, either with your own work to respond to where we find ourselves?
I think it's, especially in the early work, it's the urban debris. I think that he's a great maker of debris of all kinds. That is, like, debris is like the aftermath of something violent or horrible, or debris as like a beautiful ruin, or just like trash, and repurposed as costume. In this, case, it's a beautiful kettle, which he did in this Martial Memory, and then, like, almost 50 years later, and the drawing, which I think is my favorite of the kettle, is it's just incredible because, like, it has a quality of being like a snail that is breathing steam or something. And but what attracts me the most to this Martial Memory is that there's a solemnity in early Guston, and later on that gets replaced by sometimes grotesqueness and humor, very deliberately. And this wartime image, which is an earlier one, it's for that reason I find it very special. It's a kind of like what he called serious play. So it's a kind of child's play, costume, drama, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things about Guston that can be really inspiring and in different ways. I think one thing is how his paintings always feel alive, and that there's this kind of, it's like not really a picture of something, it is a thing, and that's such a great aspiration for making anything. Like, you want to make something that feels alive or that didn't exist before, and you have to paint it for it to exist. It's a type of impulse towards painting, and I think that's really a really exciting thing about him. But there's also things about how he paints, like even like his later paintings, that kind of, or his early paintings, the kind of atmospheric, shimmering surfaces. Like, it's, I always focused so much on the later paintings, but then at the show in Washington, D.C., it was like seeing all the early paintings. I was like, oh my gosh, like that kind of glowing, shimmering pool that things are emerging out of. It was very exciting. So I feel like there's always like new things to see, and at different times in your life, they might be different for different reasons.
Salman, I was wondering if you could, we were talking so eloquently about these figures of those young boys who are the serious play aspect of it that you latched onto in Guston's work, and what that means both to kind of reflect what you're seeing out in the world, but then also what you do as an artist.
Right.
And picking out, going back to your own motifs and using them in different ways, like because the kettle really jumped out at you. So I
Right.
wanted you to expand on what you meant about that.
Well, the way that the kettle is repurposed as a kind of headgear, it's genius. I think that I've never seen that before, and I think that he must have thought so as well. Like, I think that a lot of painters tend to, think, look back at their work and think, how was I able to do this? Why can't I do it again? Because one thing that my painting works that way in the studio is that I feel like I've learned something when I think that when I finish or when I'm done with the painting, I feel, or if I'm happy with it. But then I feel like it turns out that I haven't learned anything, because when I start over again, it's a completely new struggle. Like, in a greedy sense, almost, I feel like I've got it in the bag now. Now I can get all my ideas out. And so I think that tragedy makes maybe a lot of artists go back and see, how did I do that? Like,
Returning to kind of working with the same idea and keep having that conversation time and again and over time.
Yeah. And then there's the metal patching on the kettle, which is like so Guston, and I love that it's like it looks like it's a survivor of something. Like, it survived a whole lot, and it's almost like, it's identity, like patchwork. It's like, are we all just patchwork of stuff?
Yeah, and it's a kind of a battered and bruised and weathered object in itself. But it's also kind of, we know that, and including that kettle, which is in the studio, but he collected a lot of this stuff, so it was interesting that you talked about the detritus and included a lot of this material in the studio as well. And it made me think about, like, how do you think about bringing the outside world in and in the studio? And I know you think a lot about that, Dana, as well, and whether it's a street scene or the stuff of the world around you
I think that sometimes there'll be something happening in the world, and you can sort of be like, well, what is this like? Like, how could you make a painting about this? And sometimes it can be a very abstract tension in the world, like something that's going on in the news or just in life or things that are happening, and you can, I think it's sort of I always think it's interesting to try to paint something that doesn't quite have an image yet, so it's like trying to picture what it feels like. So and sometimes I don't know. Like, it's like something, an idea can grow. Like, you can, I on the way to the studio, I try to run, but I don't do it that much anymore. But wishful thinking. Anyway, but I kind of like that time, because you can just focus on like one thought and just try to think of like, how would that be? How could that exist or something? But yeah.
And you see that distillation of ideas through a single object, like almost like a meditation on a single object in some of those little panel paintings, and certainly in some of these later works as well, which kind of hold a lot, even though they are these singular forms.
I mean, it's amazing how the single panel paintings, they feel so like they don't really stay with their nameable object. Like, they're constantly turning into completely other things, different scale for what they are, different, they're always kind of in between. And I think in that way that they become like these kind of meaning machines, like they're keeping on, their meaning is always kind of deferred or something, like they kind of feel bigger than what they are in terms of what they mean, I guess.
It's definitely very good at that, like the whole like Guston, like dictionary that is like with a single object
Yeah.
in it. It's just, I really love that. They're like, they kind of become like hieroglyphics almost that could make like a sentence,
Right.
like
yeah.
a cryptic sentence
Yeah.
of objects, and the objects transform too. But I read somewhere about this kettle that, like, he said, like, I mean, like with many other things he did, probably he said, like, there's no reason. Like, I didn't do this. I didn't, draw this kettle because I wanted, like, that there was any meaning in it for me, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it has something. It has some kind of gravitas.
Right.
And it generates a lot of meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the kind of distillation of them, these little objects into meaning machines. But I kind of just moving on, I think, and certainly that's true of the little object on the top left of this slide as well, which packs so much in. I know you were drawn to that, but you really, the other kind of leitmotif that you see in some of these later works is the kind, and you talked about this a little bit, Salman, in relation to your own work, and I see this in yours as well, Dana, is the kind of messiness and brokenness of the body. On the one hand, we can see these as, certainly with these late works, Guston grappling with his own vulnerability and mortality in what's this last decade of his life, but there's also a way in which it can extend beyond the personal and into the social sphere and become stand-in for the bruised and battered body politic as well. Is that something that you recognize, and how does art work in tough times, and how do you see art working in tough times?
I think art can be gutsy and brave, and I'm not sure my own my own practice could make a dent in the world. I feel like what I'm trying to do in my own studio is to persuade myself and to be able to deal with tough times that are happening in the world, and to take kind of meditative time to maybe process it as a kind of like introverted painter person, to process relationships and the larger news cycle of the world, and right now it's a pretty bad one. I guess on some level, like, speaking of the news cycle, like, there's the central image of the little fire with the 3 legs. It's like a 3-legged brazier with fire going, and it looks like it kind of reminds me of like an Italian dictator, like, kind of reaching the fever pitch of their speech somewhere. And it's an angry and dangerous little thing, although the scale of it, I think, in real life is it's larger than the body. So it's sculptural. And there's a sort of funniness in this, like, it's like a burning bush or some sort of Promethean, fire, but it's, as in most of Guston's lexicon, it's something a bit hard-edged and dangerous. Like, it's, these things are not soft. You want to keep a little bit away. Like, it's simmering. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that little painting of the fire.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like a little fire that's yearning for the light, and there's no light, and it or it's waiting for day or something, and it feels like a little singer or something to me. Like, it's
the
on
plinth, the kind of the stage, or the thing that it's standing on. That's so
right.
funny.
And how it just sort of leans over.
Yeah.
And this sort of sunset that is that's tortured. This
sunset.
kind of tortured sunset that feels like a little TV, which is such an incredible idea, that if you could somehow make an object out of the sunset, and then everybody could fight over it. which is kind of amazing. And I couldn't figure out for what that thing, that kind of hockey puck thing underneath it, if that was like a clamp or if it felt like an object that looked like the sun but was now just an object on the ground that's shimming the whole thing, or like a little stage. But it's such a strange, amazing object. It's incredible.
Yeah. And it's dragging the world, dragging the path behind it, or erasing the one before it. It kind of has you in that space of ambiguity, and apologies for the bad slide of the image of the. It's impossible to actually the digital image never does justice to flame the painting, and it rewards close looking in person. And it was such a treat to see it when you do, because it's true that the flame feels almost beleaguered in that darkness over there. And just to kind of maybe bring us to a close, if there's a beleaguered element in some of these, or kind of this pathos, there are these divergences, right, that are navigated in paint in Guston's canvases, between the pleasure and the pain, the indulging in the lusciousness of the brush strokes, at the same time confronting the difficulty of the subjects rendered, between that humor and pathos, and how do you make sense of these? I mean, you started getting at this, Dana, when you were talking about the bowl of cherries like a bomb, like a plate of bombs in some ways as well. So it's it just goes to show there's that tension that he's constantly playing with as well.
Yeah, like this guy on the hill, it's like he's never going to get up that hill. Like he might try, or maybe that's why he's so wounded, is from just trying or rolling on the ground, and he's kind of like another one of these objects that are strewn out there. But yeah, I think that's always interesting too, how like with Guston, these objects, they can appear differently in different paintings. Like one painting of cherries is different from another, and this is sort of like this strange tight stack that feels almost like I don't know.
I'm worried about the cherries, though.
Are you worried?
Yeah, I feel like there's a big Guston shoe that's gonna step on them.
Right.
There will be juice everywhere, and they'll be dead, all of them.
Right.
So I feel like, and like even their little stems, like they kind of remind me of the Guston, the nails. Like they're just in Guston universe. I just feel like this is a bunch of like citizens who have no idea what's coming to them, like, but yeah, this the badged up head is just. I wish I could like totally just rip it off completely. And I've tried to skirt around it in my own painting, but just like the bandaged, patched over stuff is just like, it's just endlessly fascinating. It looks like it was like a colossal sculpture, and the head has been, like it's part of the debris of some ancient temple. But yeah, it's the debris. The dangerous debris and the juicy, vulnerable things.
The juicy, vulnerable things. Is that where we're going to find ourselves? on the brink, on the precipice, rolling up or down a hill. Dana, can I give you the last word? Do you have any closing thoughts for us as we contemplate juicy cherries?
I liked what Salman said so much. That's a great last word. Yeah. But I like that head. Okay, go on.
Less bruising, hopefully, but let's see. We've got cherries potentially, but maybe they're threatening cherries. I like that. Well, thank you so much. I think we're at time, but I really lovely to have you. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Salman.